My wife is ugly and her food tastes awful. As his wife, you should do better. The words of my uncle, who was red-faced from alcohol, were advocated by other men and their relatives. My husband, getting more excited from others agreeing him, spat out my complaints one after the other. He had a triumphant expression on his face. I took a deep breath in order to contain my embarrassment and anger. At that moment, my mother-in-law suddenly stood up from her chair and glared at my husband. Is that all you've got to say? With the words from my mother-in-law, the room got quiet all at once. My name is Emma, and I am a 40-year-old working in a medical office. I met my husband Tom, who is an office worker, 4 years older than me, through our common interest in tennis. We are married for 13 years. My husband and I adore children, but we were unable to have any, and I felt sorry for him. My in-laws, who live apart, are constantly concerned about us. Especially my mother-in-law and I have a good relationship, and we go out to lunch and shop together. My mother died when I was little, so my mother-in-law is like a real mother to me. My mother-in-law adored me as if I were her own child. Our marriage was not going bad, but after about 10 years, my husband became very bossy. Now he has absolutely no kindness to me. Furthermore, my husband has been working overtime and traveling more and more. He has been transferred to a different department at work 3 years ago. He doesn't come home half of the week. When he does return home, he says, "Hey, dinner. Hey, is the bath ready yet?" He treats me as if I were a servant. Once, I couldn't take it any longer and complained to my husband. "You're not a child anymore. You should at least prepare your own clothes." Then he said, "What are you saying? Your duty is to obey me as your husband. Don't complain. You're my wife." For an hour, my husband pointed his finger at me, raised his voice, and abused me. Not only that, but he would repeatedly bring up this incident whenever he is in a bad mood, and there was nothing I could do about it. Because my husband was so annoying and troublesome, I had no choice but to obey him. When I was sitting at the table for dinner one day, he asked, "What's with all the vegetables again? Am I a rabbit? Now get up and put the meat out already." "You have high cholesterol, so I thought it's better to cut back on the meat." As if to interrupt me, he got up from his chair and threw the meal I made onto the floor. "Nobody knows my body better than I do. I'm going to eat out." "Wait!" My husband ignored my attempts to stop him, leaving the house with only his wallet and cell phone. He closed the front door loudly behind him. Every day I had searched the internet for recipes that reduced salt in meat for my husband. His cholesterol was high according to the company's medical checkup. All of my efforts were worthless. I picked up the food that made a mess on the floor, feeling depressed. My husband returned home 3 hours later, humming a song, drunk. I had no choice but to pick up his coat he threw on the ground and realized that it had grilled meat and perfume smell. I had suspected in the past that my husband was cheating on me, but there was no proof, so I tried not to be concerned. However, the scent of the perfume made me suspect my husband of cheating even more strongly this time. Since then, when my husband gets in a bad mood, he would leave the house without saying anything, and he takes a bath as soon as he gets home every time. Oh, it's the same perfume. I could smell it, even from the laundry basket, without smelling his coat directly. You won't be able to sing carelessly in the shower soon. Gaining confidence that he is cheating, I decided to get the evidence to put him in hell. 3 weeks later, we were heading to in-laws' house. Every New Year's Day, all the relatives gather at my husband's parents' house for a party. All the relatives had already gathered when we arrived. On the table, there was a colorful and delicious-looking New Year's dinner prepared by my mother-in-law. My husband and I wished my in-laws and other relatives a Happy New Year. "You don't have to be restrained, Emma. Go ahead and eat them." "Yes, thank you very much." My husband looked at me with dissatisfied expression as I was sitting down appreciating my mother-in-law. "Hey, where are the chopsticks?" my husband exclaimed. I went to the kitchen, got them from my mother-in-law, and gave them to my husband. "Hey, where are the cups?" he asked. "Can't you do that without being asked? You should care about your surroundings." Even though all of our relatives were there, my husband kept abusing me. "I'm not a psychic. You should at least tell me or I won't understand." I contained my irritation and handed him a glass, and he sipped the sake the relatives had poured him with a delicious smile. "Would you like a glass too, Emma?" My uncle also offered me a drink, but my husband declined before I said anything. "She's my driver, so," he said. My mother-in-law and other female relatives were busily working in the kitchen. They were preparing lunch and bringing drinks and snacks to the men. I also wore an apron I brought from home and worked non-stop. My father-in-law and the other men were having a great time and drank one bin after another. I could hear the drunk guys laughing loudly. "I am so sorry that you guys have to be busy here. I believe we should take a break." My mother-in-law prepared some hot tea for us. When we were drinking the tea and having small talk, I heard my husband's voice from the living room. "Let's go around revealing things we can't normally say. Let's relieve stress talking about them. It's a new year." The man rejoiced at my husband's suggestion. The loser of the rock, paper, scissors is allowed to say whatever he wants. My husband, who was weak, was alcohol, then he thinks was so drunk he couldn't even speak properly. Sounds like a lot of fun. My mother-in-law smiled and seemed interested. Actually, I had something planned for this New Year's Eve party too. Then my husband said something unexpected and I decided to use this opportunity. I took something from my bag and put it in my apron pocket. Rock, paper, scissors. With a loud yell, the game started. The losers complained about their salaries, or their bosses, one after the other. So true, so true. The listeners agreed as the loser complained. Finally, my husband lost the rock, paper, scissors, and it was his turn to present his daily complaints. I was both excited and nervous about what he was going to say. My complaint is that my wife is unattractive and her food tastes bad. My mind went blank from shock. My father-in-law flusteredly cleared his throat. When you guys got married, you were complimenting her beauty and cooking skills. That was a long time ago, Dad. She now only serves tasteless food, full of leaves, like rabbit food. My uncle's expression darkened when he heard this. That's awful. Being his wife, she should do better. My uncle's words were advocated by the men. No one knew I had been thinking about my husband's health and cooking every day. Therefore, people were saying whatever they wanted. Listening to that, I was embarrassed and angry, wanting to just run away. Following my husband, the conversation changed to complaints about their wives. I work hard every day, so increase my allowance. Stop whining and just obey me. The father-in-law was smiling as he listened, but the wives on the other end remained silent and looked down. Then it was back to my husband's turn. Everyone is fortunate to have children, he stated. My wife is a defective woman, incapable of having children. My husband should know how badly I wanted children. I had never imagined he'd abuse me like that. Sadness and frustration filled my heart. I took a deep breath and tried to keep the tears from welling up in my eyes. Everything will be fine, Emma. My mother-in-law took my hand gently. She sighed deeply and stood up from her chair, approaching my husband with a dark expression I had never seen before. Is that all you've got to say? The men were surprised by how mother-in-law yelled, as she usually appeared kind and obedient to their father-in-law. The lively atmosphere changed dramatically and became quiet. Hey, we're all having a good time, my father-in-law said to my mother-in-law. There's no need to be angry. What? You guys are the only ones having a good time. You're the one who had to put a stop to them. Shame on you. Defective woman? How could you say that? Yes, that is right. With a troubled expression on his face, the father-in-law looks down. Can't you see that we, too, have a lot to say to you men, right? The woman who had been silently nodding burst into applause. Now, don't be afraid to speak up. Let us say whatever we want, and we will feel better. Mother-in-law's words triggered the women to express their true feelings one after the other. Increase your income if you want more allowance. Why don't you just do things on your own if you don't want us to complain? I would want you to do things for me instead. When the wives made precise complaints about them, the men went speechless and apologized one after the other. Only my husband remained cold and did not seem to care. What's bad about telling the truth? Why would I apologize? No one replied to my husband's question, and they exchanged awkward glances. I will not apologize, and I will repeat myself. Such an unattractive wife, a bad cook, and a defective woman who can't have children. My husband humiliated me, repeatedly pointing his fingers at me. At this point, the sadness and frustration I had been holding back turned into uncontrollable rage. You have no right to say such a thing to me. I approached my husband calmly, secretly controlling my cell phone, which I had hidden in my apron pocket. It's not fair that you only get to relieve stress. I would love to too, and you wouldn't mind, right? You have complaints about me? Don't be a fool. I would understand appreciation, but not complaints. Oh, let's see. I took an envelope out of my pocket and spread the pictures that were inside on the table where all the relatives were seated. The photo showed my husband entering a seedy hotel room with a woman in his arms. Another photo showed my husband exiting the apartment where she lived, holding her hand. I installed a GPS device in his car after gaining confidence about the affair so that I could always find him and take photos to prove the affair. I had brought it with me, for discussing it with my mother-in-law later in private, but I had to do this in this situation. All the relatives were surprised. The room became noisy. My husband was frantically collecting the photos. It is common for a husband to cheat on his wife, right? Guys, come on. My husband asked for agreement to the men, but no one agreed. When my uncle, who had previously supported my husband, was critical about cheating, saying no, that can't be forgiven. The men nodded strongly in response to his uncle's words, but my husband remained steadfast. You guys can't even cheat on your wives? Haha, shame on you guys. My uncle stood up when he heard my husband's words. Who is the most shameful, huh? That's right, the men exclaimed. They stared coldly at my husband. My husband appeared to be trying hard to appear strong and right. I was disgusted by such demeanor, so I confronted my husband with additional evidence. Actually, I got a phone call a week ago from Madoka-san, your new love. I heard you've been dating for 3 years. Madoka? Who is that? Don't try to fool me. I heard you had a crush on your subordinate. And Maruka-san is 7 months pregnant. I'm not sure what you're talking about. My husband was attempting making excuses, but he couldn't hide his agitation. She requested that I divorce you. I heard he refused to acknowledge the child, telling her that your wife wouldn't accept the divorce. I didn't say that. Oh, that's funny. I thought you didn't know her name. Saying that, I took my cell phone out from my apron pocket. I put it on speaker and turned the volume up to maximum so that everyone in the room can hear. Did you hear what I just said, Maruka-san? She sniffles, possibly crying, and says quietly, yes. Actually, I had called the girl the day before New Year's and told her I would call her today. She wanted to know what my husband was really thinking, and so she agreed. And so I secretly called the girl right before I questioned him. When the girl overheard the entire conversation, she burst into tears and became enraged. She complained, "My wife and I are getting a divorce, and he asked me to wait until then." I never said anything like that. You, as my wife, would understand, right? Why would I? You were the only one who betrayed me. When I said this, he looked down and became silent. I will never forgive you, said the girl, and hung up. She had believed my husband's words. Here is the divorce paper. Fill it out right now. When I tried to make him to sign the divorce papers I had prepared, he started to be furious towards me. Don't be ridiculous. I can't just immediately write this down. How dare you say such a thing after all this? I'll have you pay me 2 million yen in alimony. No, I'm never going to divorce you. I don't have that much money. Her husband began to stamp his feet as if he were a child and whined. I had never seen my husband act like this before, and I almost laughed. But I continued to demand divorce and alimony from him. Tom, you're not a little kid. Shame on you. My mother-in-law must have been frustrated by my husband's pitiful demeanor. She scolded him with an exasperated expression on her face. You have no right to refuse divorce or alimony. Accept reality with dignity. It's not that easy, Mom. Hey, you would understand how I feel, right, Dad? No way. I mean, how could I? Be responsible for what you've done. The husband reluctantly signed the divorce papers and agreed to pay alimony, holding back his tears. I had thought that this gathering would be a great time to reveal my husband's affair, so I pushed him even harder. I terminated our lease at the end of this month, because you don't need 2 homes to return to, right? When I said this, the woman applauded, and the men sighed deeply. My husband left my in-laws' house as if he were fleeing from everyone's attention. The following day, I submitted divorce papers to the city office, and I moved into a rental apartment which I had already signed a contract to. I also requested 1.5 million yen in alimony from my ex-husband's unfaithful partner. It would have been a devastating blow for the girl. She had resigned from her job after becoming pregnant, but I couldn't forgive her. My ex-husband tried to rely on the girl after his apartment was terminated. He immediately wrote the child recognition paper right after divorce. However, the girl eventually dumped him and demanded 1,500,000 yen per month in child support. Furthermore, my ex-husband resigned from his job after the affair became public. It became difficult for him to remain at the company. His parents abandoned him after that, and he was unable to find a new job, so he was sleeping in an internet cafe and working part-time jobs to pay alimony. Susan, my ex-mother-in-law, informed me that my ex-husband has gotten higher cholesterol levels and harmed his body. He had been living a self-indulgent lifestyle since our divorce. Susan and I, on the other hand, became friends after the divorce and became even closer than when I was married to Tom. Now, I am content to live a peaceful life while enjoying my solitude.